Hello again, everyone, and welcome to Friday's Tech Talk. Today's session is all about how many people can take different, unexpected paths when getting into tech and how those experiences can actually become strengths. We'll talk about soft skills like communication, emotional intelligence, organization, and resilience, and how these can help you grow faster in the industry. Our speaker, Jeremy Barger, has over 15 years of experience leading software engineering teams in more than 20 countries. He has worked with both startups and large global companies. His leadership style comes from a unique background that includes time in the US Army and even doing stand-up comedy, along with a strong understanding of what motivates people at work. We're excited to have him here today to share insights that can help you whether you're just starting out or looking to move to leadership. Sit back, take notes, and let's welcome our speaker, Jeremy. Thank you. Get it. You can take it away now.
All right, thank you. Hello, everyone. Give me just a second to start sharing my screen here. So my name is Jeremy. I am currently the director of native mobile development for EXD Studios and a mobile consultant for PPL Electric Utilities in Allentown. So a few things about me, just to start off. As I've been pointing out, I've been a developer since 2007. I kind of stumbled into that one. We're going to talk about it. Managing teams for 17 years. That's just kind of how my career began. I started on the management track and then picked up the development afterwards. Teams across 5 continents, 20 countries. It has been exceptional to work with every one of them. Military veteran, United States Army, former stand-up comedian. We're going to talk about that too. For hobbies, I like photography and astrophotography. There's a picture that I took from my driveway earlier this year. And lastly, I'm founder of the Elite Academy, which stands for the Emerging Leaders in Tech. I'm trying to bridge the gap between individual contributors, senior development engineers, and people who want to jump into the management track. So my career started off very odd. I've met a lot of people in tech. I've never met anyone who followed a path anywhere close to this. Started off as a soldier in the US Army. I was training to be an interrogator, tactical interviewer. When my time with the Army ended, I went to college. And because I had been studying to do something that was related to psychology, I decided to pursue a double major in psychology and philosophy, right? Two degrees that most people consider to be absolutely useless. And in some cases, I guess that's true. While I was at college, the job that I chose to take to pay the bills was as a stand-up comedian. Now, I also work part-time as a third shift RA. That's a completely different story. But stand-up is what I focused most of my time on. And that provided me with a lot of great experiences. Walk into a room, knowing no one, and immediately being able to read them, right? You deliver content to them. You're telling jokes, you're telling stories, you're seeing how they react. And you either take a route and stick with it, or it starts to fall dead. So you have to shift to another one. Now, while I was at the University of Kentucky, I met a lot of people who were recruiters at the time. So I would go to different events. I also kind of dabbled in stand-up magic and got hired by the university to perform at a couple of events. That's where I met someone that eventually called me up one day and said, "Hey, we have a short-term 2-week project that's coming up. We think you would be a great fit for it. We want to know if you would be interested." Now, the pay for this job was exceptional, especially for a college student that was doing stand-up. So, of course, I accepted. It was installing hardware and software on hospital equipment, so IV pumps, smart medicine dispensers at local hospitals, and then you're just kind of done, right? You do the installation, you perform the QA, you're finished. Now, I had no tech background. I had dabbled with computers when I was in high school, right? I had played around with coding a little bit, but I had never intended to pursue it because my goal had always been to be a soldier. So that's what I did. Now I showed up for this 2 week assignment. It was a small team. They were all local. Some of them were engineers of some sort, software engineer, hardware engineer. So when I get there, I could not contribute as much as they could. I was probably the youngest person there by at least a decade. A lot of the people working this project were 20 years older than me in some cases. So I did what I could, right? But the one thing that I made sure I did was I listened to everything that everyone was saying and I watched what everyone was doing. I was paying very close attention. So the first week was great. I contributed here. I learned about installing software. I learned about QAing software. I learned about installing hardware and troubleshooting hardware when things would go wrong. The second week, we show up to our second location. The project manager never showed up. So here you have a team of around 15 people just standing there being paid inordinate amounts of money per hour. And we're not doing anything because no one is there to provide direction. So I saw a gap and I decided I would step in and fill it because the people that I was working with had much more technical experience with me than I did. But what I had that nobody there did was leadership experience and the ability to tackle a highly complex project and do it in a way and delegate and assign responsibilities to other people so that we could work. So without any prompting, I just stepped up after we had waited 15 minutes for the project manager to show up. And I started just assigning people tasks, right? We had all done this the previous week. I had got to know all of them. I I stepped into that gap in a way that was not abrasive, right, or overbearing. It was just, hey, there's a task that needs to be done. We know how to do it, so let's just get to work. Now, the project manager eventually showed up. Before he got there, his supervisor showed up and found out that we were already hard at work, like we were plowing away. And, what are you all doing? Oh, well, we're just doing what needs to be done. Where's the project manager? We have no idea. He's not called. We've had no word for him, so we don't know. So eventually he showed up. They sent him home, right? And they just let us continue our work unsupervised for the most part. Now, we ended up finishing that second project 3 days early because we were just functioning as a very motivated, very skillful team. And I didn't think much of it at the time. I finished the project. The contract was done. So I went back to my regular life. And a couple of weeks later, I get a call. Hey, we're going to do another installation. They actually would like to hire you as the project manager for one of these to lead the team. So my first job after that was as an IT project manager. Again, no experience, no certifications, no training courses, nothing. It was just the ability that I had to take a 30,000 foot view and help people that were on the team have a more narrow 3 foot world focus so that they could do their job while someone else was doing a different job. And then eventually, as an orchestrated team, right, we were able to accomplish and complete a very large task. And the project that I worked as just an individual contributor, we were installing 5,000 pieces of equipment, which meant 5,000 software installs, 5,000 software QA points. So it was a lot of work, but of course I took it because I didn't have a job lined up and the money that they were offering was exceptional. And I think that is the first time where I ever had an interest in the world of tech was because of the money and the security that it provided. And also for me, leadership had always been a big draw. It's just something that came naturally to me in a way. So I took it and I started doing it. And eventually that led to other opportunities. When I eventually left that company, it was because I was recruited by another company that was a small startup. They had under 200 employees at the time. They were all based in San Jose, California. I was in Kentucky. They were putting a distribution center here. So they needed an on-site technical resource because all of their hardware would pretty much be here, right? Their servers, their data center, it was in California, but everything else that basically controlled all of their production was here. So they needed someone that had the hardware and the software experience. So I was immediately pulled into a management position for a team of developers, right? And that single team turned into two teams, which turned into three teams, which eventually grew to five teams. In that position, I was promoted to the director of IT because all of a sudden someone realized, oh, well, we don't have anyone on site that can manage our network, right? That can administer the network. We don't have anyone that can administer or do any type of maintenance on any of our hardware. So that led to a promotion within the same company to a higher position that I had never even thought about or considered, but there it was. Now, they came to me at the time, hey, have you ever done a telephone installation? No, no, I have not. Have you ever troubleshooted a very specific custom printer? No, I've not done that either. But when they asked me if I would be interested or willing to do that, of course I said yes, right? Because one of the things that we're going to talk about is that when you're entering the world of tech from a non-traditional pathway, you have got to be a creator of sorts, right? A creator of opportunity, a creator for advancement. So anytime in any of my early roles that I was offered an additional responsibility, I would immediately take it. I didn't know how to do it. I was upfront about that. I didn't pretend that I could do it. In some cases, they would ask me, hey, do you know how to do this? And if it was something that I had heard of that I might have toyed around with but never really done, I would always say, yeah, of course I knew that because I knew I could. So after I was the director of software engineering, I ended up taking a job as a development instructor and mentor for another boot camp. Now, this was many, many years ago. It was one of the first online boot camps that was formed in the US, and they were focused purely on native mobile development. So iOS. Android was not so big when they first started, so their sole focus was iOS. The company that I was working for at the time, we were moving in a native mobile direction. So they asked me, because I was already managing teams of developers, would you be interested in developing a team of mobile developers? And I said, absolutely. Do you know how to do that? No, I do not. So I actually got to attend the boot camp that I eventually became an instructor at as a student, went through their course, found it to be extremely helpful, was really impressed with what they were able to deliver and provide to students. And eventually I had a chance to jump on and work with them, and I did. And there I had the opportunity to help them create the curriculum as it changed. So I was able to update and help them develop that. Now, after that, there are a bunch of positions that are going to pop up here: a senior manager, a consultant, a senior developer, a tech lead, an individual contributor. I have bounced around with a lot of positions since then. For me, I'm much more interested, and I've always been more interested in the role itself than the title. So when I left the director of software engineering position, that was because I was going to be a senior manager. But at the time, for me, that was the correct path to take. So I have actually done full-time hands-on development. And the reason that I learned development as a development manager with no requirement to, nobody ever told me I had to. But as a manager, I wanted to know what my team was doing, right? Not that I thought I was going to get to their level in that role, because when I first started, I had no experience. But I was fascinated. I found it fun, right? I found it exceptionally entertaining that someone would come to us with an outlandish, very ill thought, incomplete requirements. And then the team would ask questions. They would ask questions that I would never think of. And from that, we were able to deliver a full scaled application that provided tremendous value to people. And that's why I wanted to learn it. So I did. And at the time when I was working at one point for a textbook rental company. So I was managing developers in a warehouse of textbooks. So you just pulled one off the shelf and studied, right? Because I wanted to learn. So with that pathway into tech and into my leadership roles, I wanted to focus on what I considered to be the three C's to kind of kickstart your career, right? To take it to new levels. These three things, in my opinion, are the most important skill sets that you can possess, right? As a developer, as a manager, as a product manager, as a QA analyst. And that's because these three items, if you are the best highest skilled developer in your company, but you can't do any of these three things, then you're going to provide very little value, right? And we're going to start with communicator, right? So you have to be a great communicator if you want to be successful. Why is that? Well, if you can't communicate what you intend to do, if you can't communicate with your teammates, with product, right, with the business about what their needs are, you have to remember that communication is a two-way interaction, right? You're not just always sending messages. When most people hear, oh, I need to be a communicator, a good communicator, they think about the fact that they need to be able to present a message very well, and you do need to be able to do that. But more importantly, you need to be able to receive a message very well. So you need to be able to consume data and take that and figure out what is actually needed on your end. So when it comes to communication, there are three main points that you should always keep in the forefront of your mind. One, your communication should be clear, concise, and complete. Those things might sound contradictory, but they're not. You need to clearly state what it is that you need or what you intend to do. You need to be concise with that. So a lot of new developers that I've worked with over the years have had this need to over communicate what it was that they plan to do, down to I'm going to give you very detailed step-by-step instructions for every single thing that I'm going to do. Sometimes that's necessary depending on the circumstance. More often than not, it's not. And that's where the completeness comes in, right? You need to be as short as you can be, but as complete as you need to be. And that's where the magic lies. Now, when do you determine how much detail is needed? Well, that's point number two, right? You have to consider your audience. So when I first started working in tech as a development manager, it was really hard for me to follow conversations sometimes because I was sitting there with my development team and they were talking about a new feature that we needed to develop or a bug that had popped up in one of our applications that needed to be fixed. And they were talking at a level that was normal for them. But I was not a technical individual when I first started. So all of that went completely over my head. I took notes, right? Because again, part of being a good communicator is to listen to everything. And when you hear words repeated or when you hear phrases repeated more than once, it's always a good idea just to notate them down so that you can research them later and find out exactly what they were talking about. So when you, as a developer entering the world of tech, it's important to realize that when you're speaking to people, perhaps on the business side, right, on the product side that are not technical, all right, consider your audience. So when you communicate with them, try not to use overly technical terms, right? Instead, I'm going to get to all questions at the end. I don't want anybody to think I'm ignoring them. So we will come back to you, I promise. But consider your audience, right? When you're talking to your development manager, you can obviously provide them with more technical details than you will give your product manager, right? Your scrum master. So just remember that your audience will dictate how you communicate, right? And it also should dictate how you listen. When you're talking to someone from product, right? And I don't want to insult anybody when I say this. I've done it before with this exact comment, but everyone outside of the engineering team, of the engineering department, they don't really understand technology, especially to the level that developers do. So to them, when they enter their username and password and tap sign in, right, it's black magic. They don't know how it works, but hey, it logs them in and it pulls up all the information that they were looking for. Well, as a developer, you know that when product comes to you and says, hey, we need a new login screen, you need to receive that message in a different way than you would if a senior engineer or a development manager, right, or an individual contributor is talking about creating a login screen. Because for product, they're just saying basically they want a screen where a user can put in their username, their password, sign in. You know, if they forgot their password, they can retrieve it. They can create an account if they don't have one. But they don't think about all of the things that you as a developer will have to consider from the technical side. What if that username or email already exists? What if the password that they enter is incorrect, right? And some of this is going to require you to collaborate with teams outside of your own, because cybersecurity, right? They're going to have a say in how password errors and password retrieval is handled. It is not a good cybersecurity practice if a user enters the wrong password to send them an error message that says, hey, you entered the wrong password. Because that lets them know, okay, well, this account exists and this current password is wrong. And then they can, make attempts to hack it. Instead, almost every app now will just tell you the username or the email was incorrect. So when you get a task from product, from business, again, receive that based on your audience, knowing that they're not probably going to come to you with everything considered that needs to be considered. And again, we've talked about this two-way interaction, right? Listen as much as you talk and make sure that you retain as much as you can. And if you can't remember things, I currently work with people who don't remember things as well as I do. Write everything down, right? Record meetings if you're allowed to, so you can go back and reference them later. But the first step into being successful, not just as a developer, right, but in any career, is to ensure that you are a great communicator. Now, coming out of this, one of the things that I just talked about was being a good collaborator, right? When you hear, oh, you need to be a good collaborator, most people think, okay, well, I need to collaborate within my team, right? I need to work with my scrum master and the tech lead, right? Or the senior engineer that is leading a certain project. But that is true, right? You absolutely need to be a good teammate, but then you also have to be cross-functional as a team. So by that, there are probably going to be dependencies, right? If you're working for a company of any size, right, that is medium or large size, right? Anything other than a startup, you're going to be working on products that have multiple teams that are probably pulling from the same data, that might be updating the same data. So when it comes time for you to work on a new feature or a new product, you do have to consider how that work might impact another team, right? So the first thing, when it comes to collaboration, you need to have a broad view, but a narrow focus. What I mean by that is when you approach a new feature, right, or a new product, you need to start with a 30,000-foot view, right? You need to elevate your thought process a little bit, take in the big picture. All right, if we do this, how is it going to affect A? How will it affect B? How will it affect C? Once you do that, right, it can alert you to anything that might trip you or your team up. You need to narrow your focus in. Now, I've worked on a lot of teams. I've led a lot of teams. I've done development work as part of the teams that I've led. Having a broad view is one of the most underrated skills that I have experienced, right? It is rare for me to join a new team and have their developers just take a broad view, right? They're too focused on their work, and there's reasons for that, right? We understand everybody has priorities we have to perform, but taking the broad view first will help save you a lot of trouble the further down the road you get, because you're going to see issues that potentially come up involving other teams, involving other services, maybe involving your own product, because you're not so focused on, we were given this task, we have to get it done. And I've run into that recently, right? There are requirements that have been overlooked on projects that I've worked on over the past couple of years because the focus was too narrow. It was not broad enough. Now, another thing that has helped me in my career tremendously has been taking ownership of tasks, right? When the team is given a task, the team has to own it. But when you are given a portion of that task, you have to own that as well, right? My general rule with my teams, with my coworkers outside of my team, with my friends, with my family, if you pick something up, you carry it, right? That's part of being a good teammate, a good collaborator. So if you say that you will do one portion of work, you make sure it gets done, right? Don't, if you run into a problem, just assume that someone else will do it for you. You can absolutely reach out to get help, right? But get only the help that you need, and then try to continue making progress on it on your own without getting someone else to do that work for you, right? It's going to be the best way to grow your technical skill. And so we'll take in a broad view, right? When you're working on any piece of technology, right, and you're working on a specific piece of functionality, understanding how that new functionality interacts and interfaces with all of the services, right, all of the backends that your company has is going to make you, it's going to grow your knowledge tremendously. And it's going to make you, it's going to increase your value exponentially to the company because now you're not just worried about your little slice, right? You understand how everything that you and your team does affects the company overall. So you take ownership of it, but you also have to remember that collaboration is not coercion, right? You collaborate with other teams because you need to, because you've got the best interest of the company, because you've got the best interest of your team, because you want to do a good job, right? But if there is a team that is not doing the work that they are required to, if there is a teammate that is not doing the job that they are supposed to be doing, that does not mean that you have to pick up their load and carry it for them. Now, this gets dicey, right? Because if you're new to a team, if you're new to tech, if you're a junior developer, it's hard to speak up, right? It's hard to call people out. However, anywhere you work, there should be clear lines of communication between you and your tech lead, right? Between the tech lead and the manager. So you need to find the appropriate people, appropriate channels of communication so that if you run into a case where you're doing your job, but now your progress is being impeded because one of your teammates, right, or another team is not doing their job, you know exactly who to go to and tell about that. And you don't have to do it in a way that is necessarily, hey, like this person is a jerk, right? They're useless. They're not doing anything. No, everybody's busy. Things come up. They might have got pulled into a bug that was a higher priority than what you thought they were working on. So it goes back one to communication, right? When things go wrong and now people start getting pulled off to put out fires, that needs to be communicated. And if that's properly communicated, then you'll never run into a case where all of a sudden you've done your work, you're expecting someone else to have been done as well, but they're not, and you don't know why, right? Because if you're communicating, if you're collaborating with each other, then it's automatically going to be there. And again, I can't overstress collaboration enough. It is one of the most important skill sets that you can learn because learning how to interface with other teams, learning how to communicate them, right? Just learning who does what and why that needs to be done. That will take your career leaps and bounds ahead of other people. So many people, again, are so narrowly focused on just what they need to do that they lose the value in knowing what everyone and everything does. So the last C here, and this is probably the most important of the three, is you have to have great composure, right? I've been on a lot of teams where we have been under the gun. Things have gone horribly wrong. Things have gone off the rails. And now we're behind. Now budgets are being busted, right? And people are coming to me and they're saying why. And this has happened both as a developer and as a manager, right? And the most important skill that you can develop is maintaining your composure regardless of what is happening, especially when you're new, right? Things are going to be stressful. You're going to be under the gun. You're going to have deadlines to hit. You might not know exactly how to hit them, but remaining cool, remaining calm, not panicking, right? Not snapping at your teammates or your office mates. That is going to be what helps you rise above everyone else, right? And the most important thing to realize when it comes to composure is that feeling an emotion and reacting to that emotion and then responding to that emotion are three different stages of the same process. You feel an emotion first, you will have an instinctual reaction to that emotion that you have control over, but it's so instinctual. Sometimes it happens before you realize it. But the way that you respond is key, right? I have been in meetings. This happened as a mentor, right? I would have students that would get stressed out because they could not understand a specific task that was given to them. They couldn't figure out how to solve a specific challenge, and the stress would get to them, and I could tell it. And I was trying to help them work through it. You could see the emotions bubbling up, right? And I could see their reaction just continue to escalate and escalate, no matter how much I tried to de-escalate it. And eventually when they responded, it was in an unpleasant way, right? It was with anger, it was with frustration. They would snap at me, they might snap at their roommate, right? They might snap at their course mate. And that's just not how you need to handle things, right? You can't be a good communicator. You can't be a great communicator. You can't be a great collaborator if you have no composure. This is the glue that will hold everything in your career together, regardless of what path you take or what job you're doing, right? So realizing the emotions that you're feeling, realizing the way that you are internally reacting subconsciously, right, as it bubbles to the surface, will help you then control your response. Now, dissociation is absolutely necessary for this. It's actually necessary for everything, right? Because if we go back to being a good communicator, I have I have received feedback from my superiors, right? The people that I report up to when I'm doing my one-on-one, when I'm having my year-end review. I've received feedback from them that was given in a not kind and sometimes disrespectful manner, right? Especially when things are going wrong and you're trying to work and solve the problem. Typically, that's when people's tempers are short, right? And when tempers get short, anger comes out. And when anger is involved, respect tends to go out the window, especially kindness as well. So you have to realize that when people snap at you, yes, it's unacceptable. It should not happen, but it does, right? And we all do it. So we have to keep that in mind. But you can't take feedback that you get personally. I know that some people think that there was a book called Radical Candor that was written a few years ago, and people thought that it was groundbreaking because it espoused the view that you should just be able to give candor and give your feedback however you want it to, right? As long as you're trying to help someone and you're not doing it to be mean, say whatever you need to. Well, the problem with that is that what is mean to me, what I find to be respectful or disrespectful, is going to be very different than you or anyone else. So there is a plethora out there. And as a manager, I try to make sure I keep this in mind, right? But when you get feedback, when you're engaging with people in discussions, everyone has a different viewpoint, especially when a situation goes bad. So if you can dissociate and just step back from the situation and look at it as objectively as possible, not, okay, they said something that was rude and now I want to, come back with something that is just as rude. No, you just go, all right, they're stressed. They have their reasons. If you can maintain your cool, right? If you can take feedback that is unintentionally abrasive, if you can take comments during heated discussions that are not the kindest, right? But you can dissociate from that and still de-escalate the situation. That too is going to help your career flourish because not many people are interested in doing that. And it's a hard skill to learn, right? Because you have to fight every instinct in your body sometimes. And with this, when you dissociate, again, the point here is to seek control, not change, right? If somebody says something to you that is rude, I've received so many pieces of feedback that have made me angry. Some of them I felt were unwarranted, right? I've been blamed for situations that were way beyond my control. When that happens and I choose not to respond in the way that I want to, it's not because I'm trying to change those emotions, right? You can still be insulted. You can still have your feelings hurt. You can still think that the feedback was unnecessary and it was disrespectful, but you're not changing those emotions. You're just trying to control the situation. And again, this is a fine line here. I don't want anyone to think that I'm advocating for silence in a toxic workplace because I absolutely am not, right? If you were dealing with a toxic coworker, a toxic manager, if you were dealing with someone who is being abusive in any way, that absolutely needs to be reported. That situation needs to be resolved. I am talking now about situations that are not intentionally abusive, right? That are not intentionally toxic. It's just emotions boiling over, right? So don't try to change your emotions because that's a losing battle. Instead, just try to control them. And if you can do this, right? If you can maintain your composure, then you will be the ultimate collaborator. You will be the ultimate communicator. And because of that, people are going to come to you for answers because there are a lot of developers When I actually sit down to lock in and do some serious coding, I do like to put the headphones on. I don't like to be bothered, right? Don't talk to me. Don't look at me. Just leave me alone because I've got a job to do. The problem is that if you want to grow in your tech career, you cannot always have that mindset. So if you can learn to talk to people and communicate with them, if you can learn to be a great collaborator, then people will naturally come to you, even if you're not the leader, even if you're not the senior developer, even if you're not the tech lead. They will come to you when they need something because they know that when they come to you with their need, that you're going to hear their need, you're going to understand it, and then you are going to act on it in a way that will be beneficial to them. And stand up, right? Stand up was the perfect background to learn these three C's, right? Obviously, if you're doing stand up, you have to be able to communicate. You have to be able to observe things and communicate those observations in a humorous, comical way, right? You collaborate with the audience because you're basically everything that I did in stand up was a response to the audience's reaction. So you tell a story, you give the punchline, it gets a great, wonderful big reaction. Well, you respond to that. You build on it and keep going. If you try something and it falls flat, all right, you have to pivot and do something else. And all of that required me to keep my composure top notch, right? I couldn't respond to hecklers, not in an angry way. Now, could I mess with them, right? And joke around and make them part of the bit? Absolutely. And I've done it. But you can't get angry, right? If a joke falls flat, I couldn't take it personal, right? It's not that the joke itself was bad. It was just bad for that audience. That's another thing you need to remember, right? Your first jobs in tech are not going to be your last jobs. They might not even be your ideal or dream job, right? It's going to be the job that you can get, the job that you like, the job that is going to serve your next objective, which might be moving up in rank. It might be getting into a bigger company. It might be moving to a new technology. But the point is just to remember here is that you are in control, right? You're in control of your emotions. You're in control of your career. And with that, I want to leave some time for questions if there are any. The takeaways, if you take nothing else away, just remember that this is your journey, right? I never had my eye on tech. It was never a career objective for me. It was never what I thought I would be doing. I literally had never thought about it at all as a profession, as something I would still be doing all these years later when I was in college. But when there was a split in the pathway and a fork in the road, and somebody said, "Hey, would you like to do this?" All right, well, I enjoyed doing it before, so I figured I would take a chance on it. Right. So with that, remember that every person is unique. It's a spelling error on my part. Um, my pathway is not going to be yours, right? I've met a lot of people in tech. We've all had different entryways into tech. None of them were the same, but we all ended up in similar situations currently, right? So you might realize that you get into tech and you think that you want to be a developer, but no, you find out that you actually like gathering requirements. So you might want to head into the product side, right? You might be a product manager. Maybe you like ensuring that teams are well put together and that they're always making continuous progress towards their objective, right? You like leading meetings. You like keeping the ADO or JIRA backlog organized and put together. All right, well, maybe you want to become a Scrum Master. So if we remember that every person is unique, remember that every path is different. The biggest advice that I can give to you is don't pigeonhole yourself into what you think a developer or a career in tech should be. Because I promise you, whatever you're thinking, it's not that, right? I don't really know what it is because again, I'm still living it. But every expectation that I've ever had, every assumption has been just shattered as I've continued down my own journey. And with that, remember that every day resets to zero, right? There was a period where I was looking for a job, the market was awful, and I was getting rejection after rejection after rejection. It didn't matter what I would do. I would format my resume differently. I would update bullet points. I was posting on social media all the time. Nothing was working, right? And it's very easy to take that and get discouraged, right? To have your confidence deflated and just think, all right, well, I've made a huge mistake. No, every day resets to zero. So if you try something today and it doesn't work, guess what? Tomorrow, brand new day, right? You can try something completely different. You can try the same thing again and see if it works. It is completely up to you. So with that, thank you very much. It has truly been a joy and an honor to speak to this group. I think there were some questions. Let me see if I can pull those up and get to them.
Um, I sorry, I kind of forgot who is the person who raised their hand earlier. So
Someone raised their hand earlier. So if they had a
yeah.
question, I
Oh,
absolutely will
there we
take it
go.
now.
All right. So I'll be adjusting the settings, and I will let Art be unmuted. Just hold on for a second. Let me just where is it? Here we go. Can you try to ask the question now, Art? Let me know. I think you can unmute yourself now.
Okay. Okay, there you go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, one thing I appreciate all your topics and conversation. Um, one thing I think we got to watch out for is we so oftentimes in conversations get into how we're going to actually solve a problem. But such the important question sometimes is what problem are we trying to solve? Starting with the why, I think is a really important thing when we're having conversations at a leadership level and so forth to help guide teams is understand that we are aligned on what problems we're trying to solve for the stakeholder. And in the agile world, we'd have it be the so that part of a user story. As a who, I want what, so that why. So starting with the why, I think is important. Any thoughts you have on that?
Yep. So the only thing that I will say to that, and I agree with a lot of what you said, but when it comes to agile, so every company that I have worked for the last 10 years has been really agile focused. And some of them are so focused on process that they completely lose out on progress.
Well, which I'm
And
gonna claim that they're not really agile focused then, because one of the agile principles is people and interactions over processes and tools. Right. So they're doing it in name only at that
it
point.
is. But when
Yeah.
you think about what agile has become, it has left that tenet of people and practices, right? For people over practices for ceremony. So when you're talking about daily stand-ups and refinements and your sprint planning and your sprint retros, right? And then you need to get on swarm calls. Like if there is a problem, you're right, and you figure out what do we need to solve, and then how do we need to solve it. And then one, why are we doing any of this? There are processes galore, and I have found that most companies who claim to be agile are truly not. And I think that
Agreed.
the agile framework is somewhat of a self contradiction.
Okay.
Um,
I've been an agile coach for about 27 years now.
oh,
And
I gave I gave a
yeah,
talk at a conference a few years ago called Agile is Fragile because it all depends on the leadership and the company that is actually implementing Agile. So I appreciate you as an Agile coach. I'm a safe Agilist, so I train teams on that. So
right.
I'm not opposed to Agile at all, but I am opposed to it being implemented incorrectly. And
Agreed.
yeah, so no, that's a great point though. Thank you.
Right. All right. Awesome. Thanks.
All right. Everyone, other questions we want to ask? I do have a question though while we wait for others to drop their questions in. Um, I just have this question for Jeremy. Many bootcamps grad feels insecure about, you know, um, not having the traditional tech background, the usual things, and whenever they get like attend the boot camps. What advice do you think you can give them and have them turning to non-tech experience into a strength?
So that That's a great question, first of all. I would really focus on, so when we say tech, right, that's a very broad topic. So for me, when I first started doing development, it was a full stack development. And then I transitioned into native mobile development. And even within native mobile development, I was able to drill down and kind of get specialized there. So if you're nervous about entering the tech force, one thing I would tell you is the number of people who actually have professional computer science degrees, right? They've graduated with a computer science degree. Some of the work that they have done, and I can say this because I did go back. One thing I should have clarified in the doc was after I started working in tech, I did go back and I did pursue computer science degree because I thought it was important, right? Especially if I wanted to progress up the leadership ladder. Most of them are going to require a degree once you get to a certain level. A lot of the stuff that I learned in those computer science courses way outdated, right? It was in no way beneficial to the work that I was doing on a day-to-day basis at the time. So for me, if you're nervous about having attended a boot camp and entering the tech workforce, always remind yourself, and you might have to do it every day, and that's fine. The people who have computer science degrees are no better prepared than you are. Right. There are some fundamental things that they might have covered in their courses, especially now that they've been updated, like object-oriented programming. They might have done some things on a slightly deeper level than you, because obviously a 4-year degree is a lot longer than, a 16, 20-week boot camp. But you are just as well prepared as they are if you want to be. So focus on the fundamentals would be my number one go-to. This is what I would always tell my students when I was mentoring them, when I was a boot camp instructor. Focus on the fundamentals. And two, build everything that you can. So when I started doing native mobile development, I reverse engineered every popular app that I could find. Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all of those things you can, and every time you do that, every time you start a project and you finish it and you're able to replicate functionality that you see in other apps that to you right now probably seems impossible, right? Every time you do that, your confidence is going to grow. So don't, I guess my overall advice for that is don't buy into the stigma or the fairy tale or the fiction that those with a computer science degree possess some special knowledge that you don't. In some ways they will, but for what you're wanting to do, most likely not. And you don't know that until you get in there and you actually study computer science and you go through some of those courses and you realize, oh, okay, I've learned nothing of value here.
Good point on that one. Because most people that I've encountered with are like being super nervous and insecure about I only have an experience with boot camps. How am I supposed to level up myself in the tech industry? I always get that question a lot, and as much as I try to motivate them, they're like, but there are other candidates that would be better than me. I mean, that is everyone's thinking whenever we apply, but you always have something inside you that they don't have. So
That is absolutely correct. And this is why I chose to focus on the topics that I did today. I think that soft skills are largely overlooked in everywhere. But if you're a good communicator, then you're going to have a leg up when you apply. Because when you go into an interview, you have to be able to communicate well. And if you can communicate your knowledge and what you've learned and what you've pursued on your own outside of boot camp, or where that initial knowledge and study from boot camp led you to look into something a little bit deeper, you're going to have an absolute advantage over everyone who goes into an interview that has put no work into their communication skills at all. And one way to do that, practice your elevator pitch. Absolutely. You should be able to summarize your experience and what you hope to do and what you're good at in 15 seconds, right? Maybe less, because when you get a call from a recruiter, when you get a call for a company for their first phone screening, it's typically going to be how many, can you tell me about yourself, right? They're not so much worried about your technical skills at that point because it's not a technical interview. They just want to know about you. And if you can't communicate that, you can't even get your foot in the door. So if you can focus on those, then it will absolutely elevate you to places that you just, I will say, and again, I want everyone to know that I say this with the utmost respect. I've worked with some incredibly talented software engineers, and I mean incredibly talented. These people could do anything that you ask them to. The problem is when you ask them to do something, they don't understand it, right? Because they're so good at their job that they hear what they want to hear. They're filtering what you say through their technical lens. And what you say to them is not what they hear. And therefore, when they build you this amazing piece of functionality, it's not exactly what you needed. So now we have to go back and do it again.
All right, that's perfect. So we do have a question from Desiree, someone you already know. Um, this is what she said. Hi, Jeremy. Many of our attendees are early in. I think this correlates with my question. Are early in their tech journey. So, what would you is the one mindset you believe can help them stand out and accelerate their career? So it kind of correlates to my question earlier.
Absolutely. So with this, the one mindset shift that you can make is that you can do it, right? Whatever's being asked of you, you can absolutely do. A lot of times you are coming into interviews not thinking much. Now I know that there are some interviews that are highly technical, right? You're going to deal with binary trees and algorithms, and you're going to be asked to do things that if you've not prepared for them, they're going to be very difficult. But here's the mindset shift. You can do those things, right? Just because you haven't done them yet doesn't mean that you can't. Just because you don't know how doesn't mean that you can't learn. So I know for a lot of the students that I taught in boot camp, when they would leave, I would always get follow-up emails from them. Hey, I'm trying to do this. Can you help me? You need to become very self-reliant, and this is where resilience is going to come into play a little bit. So you've got to figure out how to teach yourself these things. With the advent of AI, right, and coding agents, all right, Claude Code, there is really nothing that you cannot do now. You might not be able to write the code, but you can look at code. And if you can read code, you eventually can understand it, no matter how complex it is. So I would say this, right? People view tech and coding as something very different than, say, reading a book, but they're kind of the same, right? If you have a basic vocabulary, you can learn to read a book of any size. It might take you a while to read them. It might take you longer to read certain books than others. But if you have that basic vocabulary, you can read any book. Same thing with coding, right? If you've only studied C# and that's all you know, and you're still at a basic level, cool. You can read a lot of code on the internet that is going to help you advance those skill sets. So the mindset shift is not can I, it's how can I, right? You got to throw that how at the beginning. How can I do this? Right? Do I use Cloud Code? Do I just Google this? Do I reach out maybe to a senior developer that I know or someone who's been a developer longer than me? But my biggest advice is don't be afraid to jump into the deep end, right? Because at the end of the day, most of the code that all of us work on is never going to kill anyone, right? We're not launching rockets into space. We're not, I mean, I started off working on medical equipment, but most people don't. So the stuff that you're doing is not going to have catastrophic, life-altering effects on anyone, especially because you're always going to do it in a development environment first. So you have got to remove the I can't, the questioning, the doubt, and start figuring on how you can do it, right? And resilience takes it because you're going to try and you're going to fail, right? But instead of being like, okay, I'm a failure, nope, I tried that, it doesn't work, I need a new solution, right? And you're just going to re-solution over and over again until you get the outcome that you expect.
All right. So hopefully that answers the Desiree's question. For other people, attendees here who have questions, please feel free to drop it in the chat. I will wait for that. All right, we have two now. All right, from Tan Saker. Um, his question is, or her question is, how does one learn to better communicate technical stuff to non-technical leadership? Any books or mental frameworks that have helped you? I've learned that to be a pain point when working in health tech with doctors.
Okay, I laugh because I've been there. So yes, I understand completely what you're saying about that being a pain point. It really is. And to be honest, the situation with doctors is one of those, it's a special situation because you're going to be in certain situations where you deal with people who are so specialized with the knowledge that they have that they just do not care about what you're going to say. All they want to hear from you is, yes, I can do it, and yes, it's done. Especially when it comes to the medical field. So with that, the way that you get better at communicating technical stuff to non-technical leadership is to try to communicate it to people now who are non-technical. I always advise people to act like you were explaining stuff to your parents or to your grandparents, because their technical knowledge is severely limited just due to the time that they have been alive on this planet and the technologies that were available to them at the time. So if you can't explain something to them in a way that they understand it, or a kid, right? People always say, explain it to me like I'm 5. That is a great practice. And a good way to do that is to do it with a developer that is much more experienced than you. So talk to them, and they will know when you use technical terms that other people would not understand, because we've been there, we've had those conversations, and they can call you on it and they can say, okay, wait a minute, say that differently, right? So really just practice it with friends. I think I've never tried this, and I'm always a little hesitant to suggest using AI chatbots for this, but I know that you can use voice mode with Claude, that you can use it with ChatGPT. You can set up a scenario there, right, to use technology to your advantage. ChatGPT, pretend you're, I don't know, 85 years old or a 5-year-old. Try explaining it to ChatGPT, see if it's too technical, get some feedback from them. But really, I would advise just reaching out to the tech community. There are some great communities out there. See if you can get involved and just bounce stuff off of other developers to kind of dial it in. And when that doesn't work, reach out to your parents, reach out to your grandparents, reach out to your friends' parents, right? Reach out to your friends who are completely not technical, who have trouble using their phone, and see if you can explain things to them in a way that they eventually understand. Practice is the only way that you're going to perfect that specific skill. And when it comes to healthcare tech and working with doctors, it sounds like you're doing that. Just remember, their time is already strained and they're dealing with a lot of stressful situations. So with them, you need to be as concise as possible. They don't want any technical details. They just want to know, can you do what I asked for? Let me know when it's done. And it's not just you they're that way with most people. So please don't take that one personally.
All right. Hopefully that answers helps, Tan. Like here, I think I mispronounced the surname earlier. All right, next one from Anu. My question is about the middle C collaboration. In a team setting, not everyone is practically a team player. Statistically speaking, there will be a percentage of team members that don't have team's best interest. Do you have any ideas about the situation?
Uh, yes, unfortunately, you are correct. So every team that I have been a part of, right, everywhere I've ever worked, I've run into this situation. If you work for a good manager, they can filter the non-team players out before they ever get hired, right? Most of the times that does not happen. So what happens when you're on a team with someone who is not a team player, who's not interested in collaboration, who is not interested in doing their job? This is where I say you need to learn the channels of escalation, right? So do you go to your team lead first? Do you go your manager? The only thing you can do in those situations is communicate to the team that work is not being done. You don't have to call the person out on it. That will lead to animosity. That will lead to some clashing, right? To some anger. So instead, you just need to constantly call out, we're blocked on this. We're not making progress here. This has to be done. And it's going to become a broken record. And I hate that you have to do this. And again, if you have a good manager or a good tech lead and you go to them, they should be the one that tackles this situation for you. I would never, ever recommend trying to confront or talk to one of your teammates about something like this on their own. You always need to involve leadership at some level, tech lead, manager, your manager's manager, which might be a director, senior manager. But follow your chain of escalation so that you don't get dinged for, going over, you went to your manager instead of your tech lead. Nope, you don't want to do that. So follow the chain of escalation, bring it up, document it, always try to call it out in any team channels that you've got. Like, have we made progress on this? Is this ready? I'm blocked because of, XYZ. And as long as you're communicating, again, that the collaboration is not happening, hopefully that will be enough to expose that situation and get it resolved. Sometimes it doesn't work. I have had to leave companies before because the collaboration was just not happening, and it was continually leading to just worst case scenario after worst case scenario. Like, everything just continued to get worse, and I had to step away from it. So always take that route, and always keep in mind you are going to have some awful managers, right? If you look at the statistics that exist, right? They've done studies where they have interviewed employees about how happy they are with their leadership. Those studies are never good. So it turns out that only 2 out of 10 people in leadership positions are doing a really good job, which means that 80% of leaders are doing a horrible job. And knowing that, you're going to have to figure out how to exist sometimes in an environment, in a situation that is not ideal. I've done it. It's not happy. It's not good, right? It's not a happy time. It's not a good time. So always, always, always keep your resume updated. Keep your skill set updated, right? Stay sharp. I always tell my team members, so on all the teams I've managed, I have advised them to continually be interviewing, right? Even if you don't have any interest in leaving right now, you should at least do a couple of interviews per quarter so that your communication skills stay sharp, so that your communication skills with your resume stay sharp, right? That you don't find yourself just sitting around letting your resume slide, letting your tech skills slide, letting your communication skills and interviews.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm not sure if it was just on my end, but I think we've lost Jeremy's. Yeah, we've lost their audio for the last few sentences that you mentioned. We didn't kind of heard you. Not yet. All right. So hmm, we do have other two questions though, but I'm just not sure how we can answer this. But let's see if we would be able to answer this via chat, so everyone can have their questions answered. Maybe. We do apologize for the technical situation, everyone. But um, yep, maybe we can try Jeremy on the chat. We really cannot hear. No worries, no worries. Well,
Okay, can you hear me now?
yep, yes,
Okay. Yeah, audio completely dropped. So yes,
it's okay.
the question about AI. We can start with that one. I've tried to read through it. It is a
Mhm.
big question. So yeah, if you want to become an AI engineer, it is not impossible to do without a college degree or a master's degree or a degree in math, right? All of those things are required. I cannot remember her name, but I just heard a great interview with a woman who decided she wanted to go into AI, and she did. So there are ways that you can study math outside of college. Absolutely, right? You can get all the way up to calculus 4. You can take linear algebra. You can do all of the stuff that you need to gain the knowledge that you need. Would I use AI to do that? Absolutely not. because it can be incorrect at times, and you don't want to start off of a bad foundation. So you absolutely are going to have to learn how to code. Um, if you're wanting to learn I would not use AI. That's just my advice. I've used it. It is good for the most part, but I would really start with some books. Uh, you need a strong math foundation if you want a career in AI. I know a few AI engineers, and the math that they can do just it boggles my mind. So absolutely, absolutely, you can. You don't have to go to college for it. You don't need a degree for it. When it comes to a hiring pathway, are you going to be overlooked because of someone does have a degree? Maybe. That is totally possible. We live in the world that we live in, regardless of whether or not it should be the way it is. So it could be that some companies will not even entertain an interview with you if you do not have a degree. But like I said, I've seen it done. So it is possible. It's just going to be very, very hard because it is the new, it is the best, and there are a lot of people trying to break into it. So I'll try to get I will try to get the name of the woman who actually broke into AI with no college degree and send that to you.
All right. Next question. We'll go with Art after this. Another question from Tan. Would you say that grad school credentials are beneficial in tech companies long term and short term in this current market? Also, how do you view working with startups as an approach to improve these skills coming in from a somewhat non technical, self learned background?
Hmm. So I'm going to answer this one backwards. Startups are a great place to work if you don't have a strong technical background, or if you don't have a lot of technical experience, right? If you've got the skill set but you don't have the working experience, startups are a great place to start if you can get into one because they move fast. They are typically not interested in perfect code. They are more interested in progress over perfection, right? There are a few startups that have run into trouble over that, but startups are a great place to go. The reason I say that is because with more established, larger companies, you're going to run into process. And with those companies, it could be harder to get your foot in the door, first of all. Secondly, once you get there, you're kind of pigeonholed into a role. And that's where you stay for a little while. Startups, you have a lot more flexibility. I've worked with several startups. I have always had the option of kind of working on whatever I wanted to be a part of because startups are small, so they don't have staff to cover all of their needs. So if you want to jump from doing backend API development to doing database management or database maintenance, you can do that, right? And they will give you the space to learn that skill, and they hopefully will provide you with some of the learning capabilities, right, to gain new knowledge. Larger companies are not so forgiving. They are not so flexible. If I'm honest, working with larger companies is my least favorite place to work because things are rigid, they're set in their way, and there's just a lot of tradition there that is hard to break. So, grad school credentials, right, being beneficial. Um, this is a trick question, and it's hard to answer. For some companies, yes, those larger companies, right, that have the tradition, that have the huge number of employees, yes, they are absolutely going to put more value on a bachelor of science or a master in computer science, or if you're lucky enough, right, a PhD. So, absolutely, depending on which route you want to take, large traditional corporation versus a small startup, maybe a small business, um, degrees are much more valuable to the larger companies. Some companies I cannot even interview at because I don't meet their degree requirements, and that's fine. I just pass them over. I assume that I wouldn't want to work there anyway if they're not willing to talk to me because of that. So yes, they are valuable, but only in certain situations, right?
All right. Art, you can ask your questions. You can mute your mic.
Oh, sure.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
So you were earlier talking about AI engineering and so forth and how to get into that. I think that one thing you can think about is approaching it from a how do you become a prompt engineer? And you don't need a math background, any of that kind of stuff for that. It's about how do I learn how to actually ask the right questions and so forth in order to get the most value out of AI type systems. You don't have to necessarily develop your own LLMs, etc. Um, but you can actually figure out how do you more smartly use and leverage the AI systems out there. And I think that's actually a good entry to kind of launch yourself into a field that is still in a pretty youthful state, so forth. So you're
It
not
is.
blocked out.
No, that is a great route to take. Most of the AI apps that are out there are AI wrappers, right? So they're doing some sort of prompt engineering.
Right.
Right now, if you have the ability, iOS development is a great place to learn AI engineering because all of their models are on the device, and that allows you to basically create things that other people might not be. You can create things in any way you want to. I know some developers for iOS that are doing like tremendously inventful like things with them. They are very inventive with the approach that they're taking, and they're learning a ton. So if
Right.
you connect with me, if anybody that's interested in that, if you connect with me on X, I or I think most of these people are also on LinkedIn. I can recommend several people that have started the track that you're wanting to follow, and you can basically look at their feed, and it is a how-to guide to get more involved in AI and prompt engineering.
Right. Awesome. Thanks.
All right. Last two questions that we do have here from John Mars. All right, we do have third one. Um, where can we find software AI engineering startup jobs? I think everywhere.
So yeah, there are a lot of them. I would be wary of most of them, if I'm honest. I would really start my search. LinkedIn is a great place to go to just find a batch of jobs. I would also just kind of X. I hate to recommend this, but there are a lot of AI jobs that I've seen posted on X lately. Also, don't be afraid to go to some of these companies that are actually the leaders in AI and look at their websites directly. You can find small offshoot startups that are doing that. It's going to take some searching because, again, a lot of the jobs that you're going to find in a general search, even on LinkedIn, they're going to be garbage. And I would absolutely not recommend doing them. Anytime that there is any trend, in this case, it's AI, right? It was, if you remember a few months back, like prompt engineering was the big thing. There are people that will take advantage of this. So one piece of advice that I can offer now that I had not even planned on talking about: be very careful when you start your job search, especially coming out of boot camp. I was contacted on LinkedIn a few months ago, and a recruiter, hey, I have a job that you would be a great fit for. So I was like, okay. I mean, I'm not looking, but I'm always open to hearing about a new opportunity. They basically sent me a form. We need you to fill this out. They asked for the last four of my social, my driver's license number, picture ID, addresses for the last 7 years. Like all of this stuff is information that you would need for identity theft. So you have to be very careful. There have been several recruiters that have contacted me on LinkedIn that have asked for the last four of my social as, oh, we just need to give this to show that we're the ones representing you and not another company. No, they don't. They don't need that. They don't need your birth date. Like age discrimination is against the law. So asking for your birth date should be an immediate red flag. So be very careful when you actually enter the job market and you start applying for these jobs on LinkedIn or other job boards. I would recommend torque.dev. If anyone is looking for a good tech community, start there as you begin your job search. But just be very careful because people will take advantage of that. And right now, AI is the hotbed for basically getting ripped off, right? Getting scammed.
All right. Yes, we really do have to be careful when it comes to our applications lately. Agree on that one. All right. Next one is from Anu again. I would love to know your opinion on the AI certification tracks that Stanford and Harvard are offering online.
Okay, so this is base level opinion. They're absolute scams. But here's the thing. There are going to be some companies that will see that you have an AI certification and they're not going to care about the quality. So if you have just an extra, I don't know how much these cost. Most of the Harvard certifications and Stanford I mean, they are a few $100s, if not several hundred. If you've got extra money to drop on them and you really want to do it, go ahead. I can't imagine that it would be a completely wasted experience. You will probably learn something. Do I think that that certification is going to help you get your money's worth out of the cost? Probably not. I really do not think it will. So there is one AI certification tech that I would recommend. I can't think of the company's name now to save the life of me, but it is basically an AI ethics certification, and it's just certifying that you will use AI ethically and how to use AI ethically. And it is from an organization that is top notch, right? They are very well respected. So that one I think would be worth the money. But Harvard and Stanford, I will tell you that most of the certifications they offer are garbage. So they are absolutely not worth the investment.
All right. Can we drop? I'm not sure if I'm getting the right link, but is this the torque.dev that you mentioned earlier?
Yep.
All right. So that is the link, Anu. All right. Last question from Darren. With startups, are there often senior developers that can help mentor the starting developers to help them grow?
There's the link for anybody that is interested to torque.dev. Uh, with startups, there are often senior developers that can help mentor. Yep. With startups, there will be. Now, the one caveat to that is that some of the most talented developers that you will find will work for startups. And there's a reason for that. Startups are very lucrative. Normally, the pay is a little bit higher than average for the job that you're doing, for the role that you're taking. They do move fast. You do get equity, right? So a lot of people want to work for startups because they get the equity and they're hoping that that startup is going to be like the next unicorn that becomes the big thing, right? That's valued at $1 billion. And then all of a sudden, your equity is worth 10 times what your salary was. And now you're rich. So there's a lot of competition to get into solid startups. The problem with getting a solid mentor out of a startup is that the developers working there, it's a minimal staff. So your developers for the startups that I've worked with, even as a manager. So I'll give you one example that is very specific from my past. I was working for a startup that I expect to do phenomenal things. We had a super talented engineering team. As the manager, right? I was actually a director at this place. I was doing hands-on coding every single day, and a huge portion of it because we only had two developers outside of me. So I was a director over three managers and two developers, which is a bizarre math. But I was coding just as much, if not more, than I was developing. And I was working a lot. I was putting in hours, but the pay was worth it. I was really passionate about the project and the job, and I loved the team. There is no way at that place that I would have been able to mentor anyone and give them any real value as a mentor. Same thing with the developers that I was working with. We were so busy that we just couldn't do it. So if you join a startup, I would lower expectations for the kind of mentor-mentee relationship that you might have. If it's a larger startup, right, that's in one of the later stages, sure, you might be able to have a great mentor experience. But if it's a true startup that is just starting to grow, you're kind of going to be on your own. It doesn't mean that you can't do it and that you won't find a mentor somewhere, but I would just kind of I would lower my expectations a little bit if that's the route you want to take. And I would look for a mentor outside of that in one of the tech communities. I will say, I think the torque.dev, they have a mentor-mentee program that they are still taking applications for. I think the applications close tonight at midnight. I think that is the the correct timeline, but I could be wrong. They might have already closed. But follow them because they open this up, I think, once or twice a year.
All right, so I actually am loving the this session right now because our attendees are pretty much engaging. We do have another question. I think this would be the last. I'm not sure, but how does age when you're coming into tech affect what kind of effect? What kind of roles would make sense when breaking into tech? In case one comes with a mixed level of work experience, so perhaps becoming a developer may not make sense financially.
Ooh, good question. I wish that you could provide more detail, although I think that would invade some personal some personal privacy. So here is my advice. Depending on what age you're coming into, right? And I'll start off with a very broad range. So anybody 40 and below. I still think that you have a good chance of making it. And I will say this: ageism is not supposed to exist in the professional like in the professional career world, but it does. So startups are typically going to look for people that are younger and that don't have too big of a family commitment, right? And they will find ways to ask these questions that does not violate law, but they will take it out there because again, you're expected to work a lot at a startup. If you're a little bit older and you're trying to break into tech and you want to become a developer because you like development, but you're worried about the financial aspect of it, I will say this: if you go to larger companies that are offering stability, right? General, 9 to 5 hours, overtime is not expected nor required. Those are probably better places for you to look. I will say this: if you're trying to get into tech, if you can get your foot in the development door, it is really easy to transition to something like product. You could transition into like a scrum master. Will those things pay more or less? It depends. It depends on the company. It depends on the level of experience that you're bringing. What I will say is your resume, just because you don't have tech experience, might not dictate your salary. So you have to be really careful here about, oh, if I try to enter, I'm a little bit older, right? And I want to be a developer, but I'm pretty far into like a normal career span. Well, find ways to tie everything that you've done in your other careers, right? Your other jobs, the other roles that you've held. Find a way to tie them in and bring value to your developer title. And you can do that, right? And that's where the soft skills come into play. Because I will tell you this, and I mean this with the utmost sincerity: a developer that can communicate, that can get in front of groups of people and talk well, right? They are worth their weight in gold because most developers have no interest in doing that. So they've never built up the skill set. So they've never done it. One of the best developers that I've worked with used to be a salesperson. They were in sales and they transitioned to development. But because they were able to get in front of people and they were able to be charismatic and they were able to communicate openly and not make things too technical, but make sure that all of the I's were dotted and T's were crossed, there was nothing that they could not do. And their value as a developer, as far as putting code into a file that was part of a project, all right, maybe not as great as 90% of the developers that they worked with, but the value that they brought far exceeded that because they were able to enable all of the other developers to work at a fast pace and get just a tremendous amount of work done. So if you want to go into a developer role because you like it, then you just really need to focus on showing how you will bring value to that role to potentially increase your salary a little bit and not worry so much about the financial things. I will tell you, with me, I had no technical experience when I started. Granted, I was probably younger than your question is aiming at, but all of the skill sets that I brought and the value that I got, which got me to a situation where I was financially stable and comfortable, were because of skill sets that had nothing to do with tech, right? Again, I was made a development manager before I knew anything about actual development. So if you are a little bit further in your career, I mean, really think about maybe applying for some type of leadership role. And if you can't do that, get your foot in the door as a developer, show them that you're actually capable of leading projects, of bringing people together, of enabling people to do work, of communicating, right? And putting the charisma out there. And before you know it, you're going to leave the technical track and head into the leadership track. And that's where the financial sense might start to, make a little more.
All right. So I guess that's it. We went over time, but that's okay. Everyone's pretty engaging, like what I said. I love this session because everyone's super interested in this, which is great. So again, everyone, thank you for joining us for this week's Friday Tech Talk, and a huge thank you to our speaker, Jeremy Barger. And we'd love to have you back for another session in the future. And everyone, be sure to tune in next week for a live tech talk. All event details are already up on our meetup account, so don't forget to check it out and save your spot. Again, everyone, Jeremy, thank you so much again, and we'll see you next week, same time, same channel. Thank you so much, everyone. Happy weekend.
Thank you.
Bye bye.